All right, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you're at in the world. Welcome, welcome. Yeah, that we'll get to that. We'll get to that. There's some things to be learned here, I think. But yeah, we've got some quote unquote battle gameplay. I will say right off the bat that this gameplay is highly edited. It doesn't show any UI, so there are some limitations there, obviously, but it probably can still learn some things by watching. Maybe not what we all would have wanted in terms of an actual gameplay video, but, well, take what we can get at this point. Not one to look a gameplay horse in the mouth, but yeah, I would have liked to have seen a little bit more of the UI elements and some different things mixed in there, but at the very least, we get some actual quote-unquote battle gameplay. So let's get to it here. If you guys haven't watched it, this is, yeah, I've watched it a little bit, didn't really take too detailed of notes. Yeah, just kind of wanted to do a live reaction with you all here. Let me just get this started, check the audio. Quick disclaimer, obviously this is all a work in progress, things are subject to change, but
more than a wall, a symbol of everlasting defiance is besieged. Demon armies in...
Okay, so right off the bat, I wanted to pause real quick and just note that this is some kind of effect here. I'm not sure exactly what this is. Probably a spell, if I had to guess. But these Jade Warriors here, nice stance, by the way. They do have some kind of effect, defensive effect, it looks like, on them. Roll the film. But we're gonna look inside its... Yeah, exactly, dude. Tzeentch. We're gonna check it out, and I have to say, this poor balloon, man. Rest in pepperonis to that poor crew that just got sacrificed in that balloon for no good reason, probably, except that it looked amazing. We see all this range fire coming in from Tzeentch, and it definitely seems that, I mean, we have yet to see Nurgle and Slaanesh, obviously. Khorne had very little shooting at all. Only the skull cannons, right? I think. So, right off the bat, we can see Tzeentch is definitely a shootier army, and I think they're even going to mention it here in just a second that Cathay does have a ranged advantage against Tzeentch, but Tzeentch is very strong shooting, probably the strongest shooting of a demon faction. We see this is a unit Lord of Change, so Big Bird confirmed gets flying, which is just great. They're going to also show, it looks like flying can be toggled on certain units. I know that's something they were testing out in the latest Troy DLC. It looks like they've implemented it here, which does make a lot of sense and is awesome, but we see Big Bird very clearly flying around there.
To overwhelm the wall and corrupt the lands of Cathay beyond.
Yes, so obviously this is going to be Miao Ying versus Kairos Fateweaver.
Provinces, master of the storm winds and supreme matriarch of Nangao, rides with her
good to learn some here.
Drive back the chaos.
Nice animations, obviously. We get to see some of the actual
one of three
the Sneck Gate. Sotek would be proud. We're holding the Sneck Gate, guys.
gateways bridging Grand Cathay and the Chaos Wastes. A fortress built into the Great Bastion itself.
So it is a one-wall assault, unfortunately, you know. As uninteresting as that is, in my opinion, considering what we've had for the last while. I understand why they did it from a design decision to a degree, but I'd also have to note here that this is one thing. In one of the earlier screenshots, the War Compass, which is what this thing is, was being pulled by horses. It looks like now they put the golden ox on there, which I think is cooler for sure.
Beyond that will suffer. Best to face these demons head on in a fortress built for defense.
I know, right? And I guess there's like a phoenix relative trapped inside. You can actually see the lights kind of dancing.
For defense, than to allow
it's interesting.
Them to encircle and besiege anyone.
Jade Warriors with their little stop sign shields, little octagonal shields. I love those.
Any one of Cathay's majestic cities. Should the unthinkable happen, Cathay is not indefensible. Chaos will find every inch of every street hard fought and shielded every step of the way.
Someone could definitely make that. I mean,
no less from his loyal subjects.
There's not really a lot to go on in this early part. It's just a lot of exposition, some beautiful shots. We get to see some animations in action, which is great. These crossbowmen are absolutely hustling. Oh, nice and up close to the Jade or the Dragon Guard as well. They're hustling.
She is the storm.
And then, as we saw with Katarina, I think this is actually literally the same animation set, just with the electricity instead. I don't know, maybe it's slightly different. I would actually need to compare side by side. I guess it would have to be different, right? Because Katarina's holding a sword and a staff, so some minor differences, but you know, kind of locomoting about the battlefield in a similar way, just on you know, bunch of lightning instead of ice, which is awesome. Yeah, I have to agree, Prince of Zing. The art team, like, consistently, always for Total War Warhammer, has blown it out of the park. This is no exception. Absolutely everything looks incredible.
And expertly wields the law of Yin to both smite her foes and grant boons to her soldiers.
Yes. So, we'll see. It looks like, and again, I don't know that I guess we'll see maybe later on if they can officially confirm this, but it looks like to me that she has to be in human form to cast spells, which I think is a good way of kind of balancing out the fact that she can turn into a literal dragon.
Grand Cathay at its core approaches war defensively. Centuries beating back the endless waves of chaos.
We can see there's some different, and they're having some fancy editing with it, but we can definitely see that there's like overlapping layers where units can get a downhill line of fire into units below them.
Whilst archers.
Yeah, see, it was quick. Did you see it? So notice how this is, and again, I don't know 100%, but it looks like the camera angle is flat on. And the like kind of area here where the archers are is actually sloping downwards slightly, which, you know, while from a practical standpoint, if you actually think about it, it doesn't really make sense. But from a Total War kind of mechanical standpoint, it does make a lot more sense that units might be able to get a better arc of fire down below them. Again, maybe I'm reading into this too much, but it does seem like there's kind of a downhill slope right here, which is nice.
Crossbow.
Here, there's obviously a downhill slope. I mean, that's literally a road. But anyway.
Wizards. Artillery.
And again here, this is a much more clearly defined because we can kind of see the top of the slope here where it flattens out, and these cannons, because they're sloped downward, are almost pointing like straight out. So hopefully that means that they can fire kind of down and into the city a little bit better to, like, once the enemy breaches the walls or whatever, they can get more effective fire. But I just wanted to point that out. I thought that was pretty neat.
And war machines decimate from afar. This is yin and yang, the harmony between Cathay's combatants, giving heart and order in the face of horrors untold.
So just as a reminder, yin and yang, basically ranged and melee units get buffs from standing near each other. I think the buff is to reload rate and something for ranged units, and I want to say it's like melee defense for melee units, I think. I don't remember 100%, but something to that effect. But one of the interesting, this is something we were kind of talking about in our multiplayer community theory crafting a little bit. It's going to be pretty easy to just park a balloon over your melee units and have them get that buff. And I mean, given that they're kind of a defensive faction anyway, you're probably going to be setting up in not quite full-on dwarven formations, but pretty close to. So likely a lot of your units, but let's say if you are going with a more melee-centric build, then maybe you bring, you know, a couple of balloons just to give that buff in an AoE. Anyway.
So in tune with the winds of magic are Cathay's wizard kind, that the mere presence of another user bolsters magical potency.
Awesome. I love that. I'd like to see that mechanic implemented for possibly like Lizardmen as well. I mean, we'll see with Tzeentch what magic mechanics he has access to in battle. We've already seen some of the campaign mechanics, but interesting mechanic here to have multiple. What that means is that going double triple caster for Cathay's, I mean, I guess both of their heroes are casters, so yeah, you kind of have to go triple caster, right? I mean, I guess technically you could take a lord that's not a caster. I don't know why you'd ever do that, but have any toothpaste recommendations? Sensodyne seems to be pretty good. Not sponsored, but yeah. Yeah, flying toggle is confirmed, and we'll see that here in just a minute, kind of in action, the way that Kairos very clearly changes stances between landed and flying. And again, I don't know if this is, maybe you can answer Book of Grudges if they have confirmed this on Discord or anywhere else. I haven't seen yet, but I don't know if it's available to all units. Like, it would make sense for certain units maybe to not be able to land, like gyrocopters, some units which actually physically don't land, like they continue to hover slightly off the ground. I don't know. Maybe it'll just be available to all flying units because that's, you know, it takes work to differentiate them. But anyway.
This elemental mastery rings true for 2 wizards as it does for 10.
So Wizard Doom stacks are confirmed for Cathay. That's going to be good.
Making Cathay's magical prowess a thing of deadly wonderment.
At the Lord of Change part. Okay.
In earnest to survive the
okay, we'll get there then. Again, I kind of skimmed over this before, and I didn't watch it super in depth, but okay, so here's Kairos. I love the introduction of the giant chicken foot. the chaos chicken foot. I love Tzeentch. Kairos, the bird theme.
As the wisest of the lords of change.
Oh yeah, you can see him very clearly in a walking stance here. And then he's going to pop up in the air in just a second.
The left scries the past, while the right.
Someone actually pointed out recently in my my Necrosphinx video that Necrosphinx in tabletop could fly. I guess you guys would have to confirm that, but
the demons of Tzeentch march forward, their legions unfathomable as they shake the very ground with their approach.
Yeah, so like I said, Tzeentch, a lot of numbers, not really too much. I mean, besides Kairos obviously being landed and now flying, like very clearly we can see that there's a toggle there.
On a powerful array of ranged and flying lesser demons to chip away at and harass the Great Bastion.
Not really a lot to talk about on these warriors that's new. I mean, kind of everything that needs to be said has been said, I think.
Whilst hammering it with horrifying spells.
Okay, and then here we see something, again, I don't know if this is, it looks like a spell. They even say it's a spell, or could it just be a straight-up ranged attack for the Lord of Change here? The unit-level Lord of Change, right?
Flying spells from afar. But given the fortress walls to hunker behind, Cathay has the rare advantage in a total...
I love that shot in particular. Can I just say, whoever put this together, this is a great shot. Her just zoom up to the wall and then gazing out. I love that for some reason. I don't know why. But okay, so now you see again the Lord of Change here is flying. You can see Kairos kind of flapping a little bit there. And again, we see the Lord of Change kind of transitioning from ground to flying with no enemy units nearby. So very clearly, flying toggle confirmed. It's a breath attack. It looks like a breath attack. Yeah. Yeah. We got a couple flamers here. It does look like the flamers are single entities. We've got a soul grinder, which looks amazing. Yeah, so we get to see some stuff in action. The Soul Grinder animations are fantastic, in my opinion.
Aid in their approach, these foul demons possess a shield of magical energy that Cathay's desperate defenders must first shatter.
Okay, so the bubble mechanic. We haven't heard too much about this. We've kind of just heard inklings. I'm interested to see how much damage it can sustain. And, you know, in just a given, obviously in a multiplayer context, especially for this channel, I do think in the campaign mechanics they said you could juice up that little bubble, almost like a Protoss shield, right? Yeah, but interesting mechanic. What it means is that either one of two things. Tzeentch is going to be pretty resistant to a good initial burst of damage, which could make them good against certain factions like Greenskins, Norska, kind of those factions that rely on that initial burst, or otherwise, depending on kind of the valuations of it, it might mean that burst damage is even more important against Tzeentch, and that you really need shock to be able to get through that, and sort of low DPS stuff is just never going to get through the shield to actually start dealing HP damage. I'm curious to see kind of the valuations on that. Obviously, it's an interesting mechanic from a balance perspective. It's very unique, I have to say. Nothing in Total War Warhammer has that, so I like that. But I do want to see and kind of get a feel for it in practice. Obviously, numbers very clearly not final, but
beneath can be wounded. The drums of war thunder, and the invasion begins.
Exalted Flamer has pink fire. Okay, yeah, I did notice that there does seem to be and here in this shot we can see, and it almost sounds like a glass breaking. I don't know if this is just the rockets landing or if this is the sound of the actual bubble like breaking. You can see a couple of them, the bubble kind of bursts.
Great cannons and fire rain rockets.
And again, we see the rockets almost like on a downhill slope here, so they can get a better firing angle. Love to see that.
Rockets. These deadly artillery units can devastate an approaching army.
Also, just these screamers just taking it straight to the face.
Demolishing the morale of even the most hardiest of men. But demons don't possess such mortal weaknesses, and it's the
okay, Exalted Flamers, the bigger pink ones, normal Flamers, smaller, lots of them. Okay, interesting.
And the Jade Warrior crossbowmen
does make sense.
Chip away at the endless hordes approaching. Nearby Celestial Dragon Guard and Jade Warriors create a harmonious battlefield for their ranged allies.
Okay, so we can see Kairos Big Bird landed on the wall there.
Harder in the name of their
looks like an actual bombardment spell here. Which is nice to see.
but it's not enough.
Yeah, definitely looks like an actual
Miao
bombardment
Ying,
spell.
sensing the impending fall of the outer wall, lends her magic and abilities to the fray.
Okay, so here's where she casts some spells. Love this, by the way. This is like almost like a dragon's dwellers below. Very cool.
She casts Talons of Night to cover the retreat of her archers and crossbowmen, and Wrath of the Storm to bolster the might of her readying Jade
Okay, so
warriors.
Wrath of the Storm, we don't know what that does. It's to buff, evidently.
Meanwhile,
But
Kairos Fateweaver instructs his minions to bring down the fortress gates. To ensure his
oh
own
yeah,
survival,
throw magic
he
javelins.
selfishly casts Oracle of Eternity to reinforce his resistance, and Gaze of Fate to counter Miao
I
Ying's
love the
boost
spell
to her
effects. I have
Jade
to say,
warriors' effect.
one thing I think in Total War Warhammer 3 that it does seem like they're stepping up is the sort of the ability to easily see when and where a spell's being cast, especially with buffs. Sometimes it can be hard to see, like, when a buff goes off. You know, some of the effects in comparison, especially to the damage spells, they're kind of low-key. So here, where it pops up with this big eye above the unit, like, from a readability standpoint, especially in multiplayer, where you're often way zoomed out, it's nice to be able to see those effects a little bit more clearly. So I'm a big fan of this change. It does seem like all the new lores of Magic have that implemented. Hopefully they back implement that to some of the older lores, and sort of make some new effects for those buffs and debuffs. Honestly, that some of the, like, banishment, for example, some of the older damage spells maybe aren't quite up to snuff as what we would expect now, but it's still, you know, good enough that it gets by. But the buffs and debuffs can be really hard to tell. I mean, a distinctive sound like Doom and Darkness is a good example, because it gives you that very distinctive screech, right? So you know it's being cast, but like here, this big eye obviously is a telltale giveaway. Not sure what exactly destroyed that tower, I'm going to be honest. I don't know if they just kind of programmed it to fall over, or is it actually getting friendly fired? Because you notice it gets demolished as soon as this rocket hits it from the back. So a little bit of treachery there possible from Cathay, I guess.
The fortress is breached, and Tzeentch can almost taste Cathay beyond the bastion.
Okay. I love the animations for this guy.
But Miao Ying isn't done yet. She falls back, retreating to her barricades, where already crossbowmen and archers are docked to cover the exodus.
Okay. You can see the towers, and again, a little bit disappointing in my opinion. I guess it's kind of to be expected. These ramshackle towers are going to look the same for everyone, I guess. These look sort of very incongruent with the rest of the settlement, and I'm hoping this is just a placeholder and that we actually get unique towers for every faction, because this does not look, I mean, it looks orcish, if anything. Does not look Cathayan at all to me. Maybe you could get away with calling it a Kislevit tower, but this right here is a 1 point, maybe a minor nitpick, but it is one. Well, they don't look culturally appropriate, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Kairos's foresight makes him a hard beast to outmaneuver.
Oh yeah, so get the nice flamer in combat here as well.
Miao Ying had hoped he would.
Ah, yes.
She orders her barricades to be deconstructed and rebuilt in the east of the fortress, where the demons
the
are
flank.
making strong headway. From here, Miao Ying knows she's entering a war of attrition.
Okay.
She's dedicated key hardpoints to fall back to, and can now only hope she has the manpower to defeat Fateweaver's forces before her own are overwhelmed.
Again, not a lot of really good, like, hard data to go on. A lot of great visuals, don't get me wrong, but we're not learning a ton of new information here. Looks amazing, though, I have to say.
It's an arduous and bitter
Artists are
battle,
definitely doing their
and
job.
Forces Miao Ying all the way back to her last line of defense. Here is
And I'm
where the
curious to
battle
see
is
the
won
ammunition
or
count.
lost.
Okay, here we go. Okay, so this is a little bit more. So, okay, you can learn a few things here. So we've got these two different ranged attacks, right? And this is from the blue and the pink horrors, obviously. It remains to be seen how much ammunition they have, kind of what the damage profile of this ranged attack is, the range on it and everything. All of those things are kind of unknown at this point, right? But it does seem that it exists, so there's that at least. We can see that there are probably, I'd imagine, two different damage profiles, most likely. Let's see here. Okay, so Lore of Metal. That's known. I mean, Searing Doom, that's nothing new, but we knew these alchemists had access to it. Good to see she's making good use of that. And here's a little bit of a more interesting shot, in my opinion. So we get this, like, breath attack, high angle from... Is that from the chariot? Or is that, I guess, would just be a standard missile attack then? It's a little bit hard to tell. There's definitely a chariot over here. And then... Yeah, another bombardment spell being used here. I want to say, and it could be wrong for game 2, but yellow template is a bound spell, right? Or an army ability. So maybe this isn't actually something from one of the lords. Maybe it's an army ability, but it could be different, I guess. I don't know. Maybe I'm reading into it a little bit too much. Big Bird doing his attack, which is great. Okay, so yeah, just a few different magic effects I wanted to take a look at a little bit closer there.
Or the bastion falls. Fate Weaver's forces are dwindled.
Yeah, Burning Chariot, that's what it's called. I always forget the name of that flying thing. I think it looks like it has a ranged attack for sure.
Fate Weaver's forces are dwindled, but...
Okay, and now this is a huge bombardment, and, you know, for the sake of playing the battle, I guess they cast it. I don't know if this is the AI or what exactly the cast on this is. Kind of hilarious that it's like, you could have hit this entire plaza with it. Instead, it's all hitting this one tower right here. But anyway, that's a huge area of effect from bombardment, and that's a ridiculous number of missiles actually dropping down. That is by far the big... I mean, that's got to be like a 30, 40 meter AoE, legit, for a bombardment spell, which I don't know if we have anything close to that in-game currently. Very powerful spell, obviously. And I don't know if that's a bound ability for Kairos or if it's an actual spell. Might be the overcast version of... It would make sense, actually, if that were the overcast version of the spell we saw cast on the wall earlier. That's sort of more tight focus, but that is a huge AoE for that. That's ridiculous. Okay. Okay. I see. So it might be a ranged attack, might be a spell, maybe a bound spell even.
And Miao Ying has only a fraction of the brave men and women she began with.
Okay, awesome. Here we go. Terracotta Sentinel versus Soul Grinder. Oh, yeah. So cool.
With little other choice, she calls upon her greatest of powers.
Oh, here we go. And now we see the dragon transformation.
Namesake, assuming her dragon form.
Oh yeah, so cool. The animations look amazing. Again, art team, 15 out of 10.
In the face of
I'm wondering how those animations are going to work in practice, if you're going to be able to hit them with missiles.
Overwhelmed and
oh, I love that disintegration. They just explode into chunks.
Has lost in the battle. But surely he knew this defeat would come to pass. Snakegate stands firm.
Snakegate stands! Praise Sotek.
Dragon, defender of the northern provinces, master of the storm winds, and supreme matriarch of Nangao, emerges victorious. But an unease settles within her gut. Tzeentch is the architect of fate, the changer of ways, and such an all-out assault is not indicative of his servants. Though the Snakegate was a victory, Miao Ying cannot shake the feeling that the day's events have held
slinking
in a
away.
of the tide. Fresh threats are awakening, and the fall of the Turtle Gate shows that the Great Bastion's resilience may not be as certain as once thought.
Similar to, yeah, a few different attack animations. Well, that's basically it. I mean, it's a pretty long video, and a lot, again, tons of great visuals. A little bit light on new information, but we do get to see some different things in practice. So that's nice. It's relatively interesting. Yeah, what do you guys think? For me, I mean, like, there are a few things we can take away. Flying toggle is confirmed. That's great. I think that's something a lot of people have been asking for a long time. I actually never thought it was going to happen, so that's great that they did it. Just goes to show if we, you know, respectfully ask for things over a long period of time, enough people ask for them, they'll probably do it. So, yeah, that's great. The magic for Tzeentch looks amazing. Definitely looks like it's going to be a very flashy missile faction. Again, we don't get any hard data or numbers, which I wouldn't really expect them to release at this point anyway, but just from a faction design perspective, Tzeentch looks very interesting, as he should. A lot of new, unique mechanics, potentially very powerful. Cathay also, I mean, pretty bog standard. I mean, not a lot of new information. Again, animations look great. The different siege mechanics sort of, we see a little more in action here. Look like they're going to be more fun than sieges are right now, which is awesome. Yeah. Again, it does, and they don't explicitly state this, but it suggests, just because she doesn't, maybe they're just saving it for the end anyway for effect, but she doesn't cast any spells while she's in her transformed form. And it also, given the fact she saves it until the end, again, it's maybe for just cinematic effect, but it also could be that there's maybe a limited timer on this, perhaps, that you can only spend a certain amount of time in form, and then you maybe have to wait for it to cool down, or maybe you can just switch freely back and forth between. So I guess I have some more questions, would be the honest answer. We get some answers on some details here, but just ends up bringing up more questions, right? Yeah, less missile faction, more New Year's firework technician team. They are going to make for some incredible thumbnails, I can tell you that much. Tzeentch is going to be the best thumbnails, probably. Not that I'm biased at all, but Tzeentch looks like it'll be hard for newer players. I do think so. I do think it's going to be a much higher micro, much higher tech faction, which it makes sense given Tzeentch's kind of lore and theme and everything. Whereas Khorne might be a little bit of a friendlier faction for newer players because you just run at your opponent, right? In various interesting ways. Tzeentch is definitely going to be... Yeah, and we haven't had the full roster reveal yet. My guess is we've basically seen everything at this point. Maybe they could sneak in a few units here or there that we haven't seen, but I think probably we've basically seen everything. Tzeentch is also going to have a really strong flying, especially the fact that you can toggle different units between flying and ground makes it a little bit less risky, I should say, to go with a heavy air build if your opponent also, counteracts in a similar way. But Tzeentch, strong air force, definitely. Strong shooting for sure. Ridiculous magic. I mean, that AoE for that bombardment, I still can't get over how insanely huge of an AoE that is for that bombardment. So, oh man, and just the rain of missiles coming down too is, I mean, how many can you count there? At least 30 missiles probably raining down in that area. She can't cast spells when she's in dragon form. Okay, so that makes sense. As a way to kind of balance things out. That's how I guessed it would work, and makes sense that it would work that way. Chariots made of literal blades. Yeah, I'm curious to see the sort of, with the way the bubble mechanic works. Again, a lot depends on the numbers for that, but if the numbers are high enough, then like low DPS stuff isn't really going to do much damage to Tzeentch, even though they appear, to be, at least in appearance, somewhat squishy. I'm also curious if any, and again, they haven't talked at all about this. This is pure tinfoil hat speculation. Maybe magic damage does more barrier damage? Maybe? I don't know. That would make sense to me, actually. And I think all demons have physical resistance anyway, right? Is what we learned from the Khorne demons. Khorne demons also specifically had spell resistance. But I do think, right, all demons have physical resistance, so magic damage is going to be well needed against all of them, I would imagine, but especially Tzeentch most likely. Yes. Yeah, I could see them having a similar rep to Wood Elves, where you have to join quick battle twice as often, every other faction. Yeah, it depends. I mean, I don't know. I don't see any of their mechanics necessarily being particularly rage-inducing, except maybe all of the flying shooting. But generally, flying shooting units are somewhat limited anyway. When with the flying toggle, and especially like with the Lord of Change and probably, Kairos having some ranged abilities. I just need to see more specifically what their ability set and toolkit is to be able to say for sure. Like, Tzeentch will be interesting in terms of tournament rules, especially if everything has ranged attacks, because a lot of tournaments are limited, what, 12 ranged units, I think, is standard these days. Some people have argued that it should be lower. You know, I'm kind of still out on that. I'm not really sure, but definitely is going to be interesting. Yeah, kite builds are probably the most rage-inducing, right? Which is why I would think, like, flying shooting units are... But you don't really have any skirmish cavalry, and the infantry doesn't appear to be particularly fast. Also, 360 shooting is probably not in the cards for many of these units. I mean, maybe we could see 360 shooting on a handful of them, but yeah, I'm not really sure. Definitely want to see more. This battle gameplay has definitely left me wanting more, I must say. But I expect we'll learn more about Tzeentch very soon. I think they said this week is all focused on Tzeentch, right? So... Yeah, that's what I'm saying, the Emperor, in terms of ammo count, like on the blue and the pink horrors, they might have a low enough model count that you could almost consider it a precursor weapon, or they might actually have, like, 6 to 10 volleys. I can't imagine they'll have a lot of volleys, just because they seem like they're meant to also fight in melee. I don't know. All demons are huge and weak versus magic damage. Happy Sisters of Avalon noises. Yes. Yes, and especially against Nurgle. Remember that in Game 3, fire damage will reduce healing received, right? So if you hit a unit with flaming attacks, it will actually give a contact effect that reduces healing received, as we saw from the Kislev battle that I got to play. So, being that as it is, yeah, Sisters of Avalon, magic damage and fire damage, very, very good. Basically, any unit with magic and fire is about to get a lot better. And also, spell resistance being changed, magic resistance being changed into spell resistance. I assume that's pretty much across the board, but what it means is that, magic attacks are never going to be a bad thing, which is, I think, probably how it should be. Yeah. I agree, Ravazar. I want to see real battle where we see unit cards, movement, charges, campaign map gameplay. None of that was showcased here, so take it as it is. It's a pretty film, and we do get to see a lot of great work of the artists and the animators, and a few kind of key details. Nothing really... I mean, I guess the flying toggle is huge for some people, but I kind of figured we were getting that anyway after it made its way into Troy. One thing that I still haven't seen in any of the preview material is them implementing the UI improvements from Choice, specifically the fatigue modifiers being shown on unit cards isn't something we've seen yet, and that just needs to be in the game. Like, I can't stress it any more than that. It needs to be in the game. And I actually have some other ideas of the UI. Maybe I'll make a video about that soon, but... in general, I think all modifiers, they have to be shown on the unit card, and fatigue is no exception. And you also should be able to mouse over, similar to how you can for leadership right now, you should be able to mouse over any stat and get a breakdown of the modifiers affecting that stat, including fatigue, spells, whatever, active effects, passive effects, whatever. Yeah. Yeah, High Elves is going to get a lot better in Game 3 with the advent of fire-reducing healing. It'll also mean that fire damage is going to be both bad and good against High Elves, because you probably want to reduce the healing they're receiving from Alariel or Teclis, but at the same time, that might be healing a Dragon Prince, which is immune to the fire damage in the first place. But, yeah. Yeah, it's more spectacle, which is nice. I agree, it's nice. The chicken foot. The Dread Chicken Foot. I mean, I'm going to probably use this for an intro. Just...
Kairos Fate Weaver is the insidious architect of this assault.
Oh, Kairos looks amazing.
The wisest of the Lords of Change. Cast into the well of eternity by Tzeentch, Fate Weaver emerged with 2 heads.
Yes.
The left scries the past, while the right foresees the future.
Yeah, they are animations from battle footage. It's true. You can tell.
Tzeentch sees both the road ahead and the path behind, but is rendered blind to the present. The demons of Tzeentch march forward, their legions unfathomable as they shake the very ground with their approach. Fate Weaver relies on a powerful array of ranged and flying lesser demons to chip away at and harass the Great Bastion.
So this is why maybe, and I guess you do have a lot of your kitey type units. Cost remains to be seen, but I mean, if you have like screamers, if you have like 4 screamers, right, you're only allowed 1 more flying unit, and if Kairos counts as your flying unit, if the Lord of Change counts as a flying unit, like, we may have to see a little bit of a revisiting of the flying limitations, because Tzeentch is going to be pretty heavily limited by that, seems like. Seems like a number of your power units are flying, which is fine in a campaign, you know, who cares, but in a multiplayer context, it does matter. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how that works. I could see Tzeentch, if it turns into a flying kitey playstyle, being particularly infuriating, but
whilst hammering it with horrifying.
See this? It does look like a breath attack. Okay, so you can see actually the template. So it's a breath spell, rather. Sorry, not a breath attack, but a breath spell. You can see kind of the almost Gaze of Malice type template go down here, and then the little blast come out. So that is an actual spell. Okay, and we do see then one thing I was pointing out earlier about the UI. So blue is for spells and abilities. I think yellow signifies an army ability. So when we're seeing these other effects later on, these might actually be like an army ability from something that Tzeentch has on the campaign map or something else. Where did we actually see that? It's closer to the end here, I think, on some of these effects, right? Yes. Okay, so you notice how this yellow is pretty clearly different from the blue we saw in the template earlier. So I think that means it's an army ability, like the Ushabti summon right now has a yellow indicator on the UI when you go to summon the Ushabti, so I think that's an army ability then. We'll see. Yeah, model looks amazing. Everything looks amazing, to be honest. The artists are incredible. And yes, the discs themselves look amazing. I do think... So, okay, so hear me out. We can get them to change the Tzeentch Warriors, and I know a lot of this stuff was already in production, so I didn't expect them to change it within the sort of preview time frame, but they, even just besides changing UI elements, you know, we got them to change the unit cards. Silverin Guard used to have tiaras on, which looked ridiculous, right? I think everyone agreed that that looked a little bit silly for Silverin Guard to be wearing tiaras, little dainty little crowns rather than helmets. Now they have helmets, right? So we can get them to change the actual unit model if we... I'm not going to say complain, but ask nicely, right? So I think there's been enough of a stir caused already in regards to the Tzeentch Warriors. Literally all they have to do is make like 2 or 3 unique helmets, 2 or 3 unique shields, and we would be happy, I think, right? For the most part. I mean, it's not like they really need to do a ton there. So... I will continue to ask nicely for some cool Tzeentch helmets and shield designs to make them feel a little bit more unique, like what we got with Khorne. I don't think it's too far out of the question, but yeah, it is what it is. We can get them to change it, I think. It's not that I think it's a lost cause already, but we should be asking in a respectful way. Also, something to note here, I think this is on ultra unit sizes, but I guess we could actually go through and try and figure out like how many are in each unit. My guess is probably 18 for the Screamers, and maybe the same for the Disc Bros. Let's see. I think it's probably a little easier if we look earlier on. So maybe on Ultra, maybe it should be up to 24, right? If they are 18 in the base large funds. It's a little bit hard to tell. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. There's maybe a couple hiding behind. So 16? Does that make sense? I'm trying to think. If they had like 12 models normally, maybe? Interesting. Yeah, and here's the thing, modders can do amazing things, that is true. So even if Creative Assembly refuses to, which I don't see them doing so, I could definitely see them, especially if they do, like, let's say they do a god-specific DLC, or maybe they do a DLC for all the Chaos Gods where they introduce, like, a couple new mortal units, considering a lot of their factions are lacking on that side, at least from the outset, that they could, at that time, take the opportunity to revamp the unit models for the Tzeentch stuff. But we'll see. Where's the Slaanesh trailer? I know, right? A lot of people are looking anxiously forward to Slaanesh and Nurgle, and of course the unnamed pre-order, which is basically all but confirmed, probably, most likely, almost guaranteed to be Ogre Kingdoms. Not official yet, but... Yes. All other Chaosers is just Tzeentch puppets anyway. I mean, arguably so. Horned Rat is the true god of chaos. Oh boy, can't wait till we see like 9 Skaven DLCs. Oh yeah, Soul Grinder looks amazing. Everything looks amazing. Even the blue horrors. Like, not everyone loves them. Or the spawns, rather. It is what it is. I mean, yes, it's not amazing, but it is chaos, right? Well, a couple things we haven't seen either, which somebody notably pointed out, is the Mutalith, right? Mutalith Vortex Beast and the Slaughter Brute, which basically have the same or a similar kit, right? I'm not up on the tabletop. Those of you guys who know more can probably say. Great Book of Grudges is still hanging around. Yeah. Will be interesting though. What else? Not a lot else to say about this. I probably am gonna be done. I do need to run relatively soon. Go get a haircut. When is this DLC release? Well, Game 3 will be out next year. Probably Q1 2022. My guess is maybe February, if I had to bet. February, possibly March, but maybe like mid to late February, if I had to bet. Be'lakor is Demons Undivided, and they share... yeah, I could see that. Clearly, the Chaos Undivided type corruption is still in the game, and I kind of expected that just because Archaon's Horde is sort of the Chaos Undivided, right? And they still haven't really said anything about how they're... or anything of what they're doing with Chaos Warriors. I think they're kind of keeping that in their back pocket for the time being, or maybe they aren't going to do anything about it until they actually integrate the big combined map. And also another thing to note is we still haven't had any level of confirmation that like, I wouldn't expect the game... I think they even did confirm, right, that the combined map is not going to be in at the start, similar to how it was with Total War Warhammer 2, so maybe they're not actually going to address the Warriors of Chaos situation until they integrate, and maybe kind of like as the kind of a DLC or free LC for that integration, kind of to tie into that, they then update the Warriors of Chaos at that point. I'm not really sure. They haven't said, so more questions, certainly. But one question I can't answer is, does Tzeentch look amazing? The answer is most certainly yes. Love the spell effects, love all the models. Cathay looks great too. Everything, makes sense animation-wise. I'm a little sad we didn't actually get to see the war cart fighting. The war compass. Like, we see it in this early shot, and then we never see it again, which is a little disappointing to me. I was hoping we'd get to see its animations, but I'd imagine it's probably not like fast enough to be a really super functional chariot if it is pulled by ox. Like, that sort of implies that it's slow, right? It may even be infantry speed, similar to how Corpse Cart is. We'll see though. Slaughter Brute is undivided. Okay. Not a god-specific unit. So then maybe they could give us a few unique units, I guess, if the Be'lakor does make in as like undivided demons only. Would the Slaughter Brute be considered a demon though? I think it's just a beast of chaos, right? I don't know. Maybe that goes with Archaon's Horde, but... Yes, move Stigvald to Slaanesh, which makes 100% sense, but then also, would you have him be able to, like... It'd be interesting, so in Attila Total War, right? And I think this was even true way back in Barbarian Invasion in Rome 1. You could actually, with certain factions, choose to, like, abandon your settlements and turn into a horde. I think it'd be really interesting if it does look like that Chaos is going to have their own settlements, right? The at least the god-specific Chaos factions. Would be interesting if Sigvald was like, started out that way, but then you have a choice to, you know, sort of go out on your own and become a Horde faction at some later date during your campaign. I think that's always an interesting choice to have. Um, but I have no idea. That's, again, pure speculation. It would be cool, but yeah, it has to be higher. If it's, standard infantry speed is like in the 30s range, right? It's like 28 to like 35-ish. So if it's faster than like 40, then it would be considered, faster than most infantry, I guess. Yeah, they do need some content for DLCs, and again, I think some people were under the misconception that they wouldn't do DLCs for the Monogod factions. I definitely don't think that's the case. I think absolutely we will see DLCs for everything, for every single faction, including like Coast and Tomb Kings and some of the older, I mean, obviously Beastmen and Wood Elves just got updated, but like Bretonnia, I fully expect new content for all of those factions at some point. Just, remains to be seen of when. Um, I do think Bretonnia could come sooner rather than later in sort of the Game 3 DLC cycle. Like in sort of the order I would rank the factions that need addressing the most. Very clearly, Warriors of Chaos and Norska are 1 and 2, right? And I expect them to be addressed probably first with the integration of the combined map. Bretonnia would probably be actually number 3 for me on that list. Tomb Kings comes in a pretty close number 4, but considering Games Workshop has already shared some sort of small lore tidbits about not only Bretonnia but the Border Princes as well, I do think Bretonnia probably will be one of the first few DLCs or free LCs, depending on what form it takes, post combined map, just based on the way their Games Workshop at least is talking about this in advance. Similar timetable to when they like dropped a couple of lore tidbits about Kislev and everyone lost their minds. I think even before they announced Game 3 officially. But I don't think so, Mel. I want to say that they're not done with any faction, and at the very least, Games Workshop is the one talking about Bretonnia. So if it's coming from on high from Games Workshop, then Creative Assembly will be doing it, right? If we get new stuff, and it does look like in the revival of the old world, Games Workshop wants to come in and expand, like Cathay. I'm assuming they're intending to just release the army book for Cathay at some point, basically as is in Total War Warhammer. They said they created an army book, at least internally, when they were talking about some of the stuff for Cathay. So yeah, I mean, given that Games Workshop is sort of the one talking about Bretonnia, I would put money on them getting new content and possibly like straight up new units that are from Games Workshop. Possibly. New nightly orders for Empires, please. I mean, Empire has plenty of stuff. Empire has 1 or 2 DLCs, even still, of stuff that was in tabletop in 8th edition that hasn't been added to the game. So hopefully we see that. Will Demon factions be like sub-factions in multiplayer? And Chaos Undivided will be able to mix all units? I'm not sure. I think this is, again, just theory. Probably Archaon will get Warriors of Chaos only. Like, he probably won't have any demon units. But he might get some of the new god-specific warrior units in his roster. If we see an Undivided Demons, then it will have only demons and no warriors. And then you would have each of the monogod factions would have an appropriate mix of warriors and demons for that specific faction. So like with Tzeentch here, for example, we see the Forsaken, we see the dudes riding the discs, kind of your, chaos warriors in quotations, right? And then the demons sort of combined. Whereas if Be'lakor had demons undivided, like he could take the Screamers, Bloodletters, a Bloodthirster, a Lord of Change all alongside each other, but no mortal followers at all, right? That, again, pure speculation. They haven't at all confirmed anything like that, but that's just, it would make sense for me if they were to do it that way. Right? Yeah, Great Book of Grudges. I'm sure it'll be interesting to see. Maybe those areas will just be blocked off and won't be accessible for the time being. I think that would honestly be a better solution than having them occupied by randy factions. Or new lords and heroes, and yeah. They did talk a little bit about, again, for lore, for more on the lore, check out Great Book of Grudges or Master Sotek, obviously. um, but they did talk a little bit about, like, there's vampires within Cathay, right? There's other stuff going on, so I'd imagine we'll see probably some undead there somehow. Yeah, it'll be interesting. Joseph Bugman. Dowie just got some love. I mean, they just got a brand new free LC Lord and big new sort of lore magic overhaul, although they do need more. I will agree. Dwarves could do with one, possibly two DLCs. I mean, they honestly have enough they could do. They really wanted to stretch it out. They could do two DLCs, but yeah, Norska's number one in terms of needs help, I think. Warriors of Chaos is probably up there, but in multiplayer, at least, Warriors of Chaos are really good in general right now. They have been pretty much throughout most of their history. There have been times they haven't been great, but especially early on. But right now they're in a pretty solid spot. Norska, they have a couple good matchups, but they're pretty rough right now in multiplayer and definitely in campaigns. So yeah, we'll see. Yeah, that's a pretty astute observation, Ravazar. I think that's safe bet for the most part. But I think that's pretty much it. I do have to run. Let me know your guys' thoughts if you're watching this post-fact in the comments down below. If you managed to make it through this whole thing, for those of you guys who joined me here live, thank you all so much for coming out. It's going to be fun. I'm hyped. Again, not a ton of hard, concrete information, but some really nice visuals. Great work of the artists, animators, all that. And a few sort of minor little... for some people, they're going to be major sort of mechanical improvements, continuing the trend of what we've seen in the past. So at this point, I really want to get my hands on the game and just start to play with some of these new mechanics in practice and really dive in, like the bubble, the flying toggle, you know, the fire damage affecting healing, spell resistance, how all of these, the new Winds of Magic system that I really haven't talked much about on this channel, but it does appear they're reworking Winds of Magic again. All these new systems and mechanics, I really want to jump in and see what the practical effect is in your typical multiplayer battle. Obviously, we won't get that opportunity probably for some time, but there it is. Thank you all so much for coming out. And yeah, we'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.